Good morning, Year 9. We're just moving on to our next topic, which is lone parent families. And this is perhaps one of the biggest changes that British society has seen in terms of family. The percentage of lone parent families has tripled since 1971, and Britain has one of the highest proportion of lone parent families in Europe, just over 1 in 5. This is 22% of all families with dependent children were lone parent families in 2017. 9 out of 10 of them were headed by women, and over 1 in 5 dependent children now live in such families, compared to just 7% in 1972. And one of my favourite examples of lone parent families is Ronaldo, who's a very outspoken and proud single dad. When we're looking at lone parents and race within British society, there is evidence that African Caribbean communities have a higher than average proportion of lone parent families, and Asian communities a lower than average proportion. More recently, though, Black Caribbeans and Black Africans are more likely than other ethnic groups to head lone parent household with dependent children. However, that these numbers appear to have fallen between 91 and 2001, according to the census. On the other hand, the proportion of lone parent families among British Asians is rising. In 1991, lone parents made up 5% of British Indian families with dependent children and 10% of British Pakistani and Bangladeshi families. However, by 2011, these figures were at 11% for British Indian families, 17% for British Pakistani families, and 16% for British Bangladeshi families. These figures indicate a rise in long-term separation and divorce. It's also important to highlight differences between British Asian groups, as we have done there. So we've identified Pakistani and Bangladeshi and Indian groups as part of British Asian families, and that's the same to do also with Black British families as well. So, how can we explain why there are more lone parent families? And we can really link back to our study of feminism here, is that women have greater economic independence, making support by a partner less of an economic necessity today compared to the past. So women don't have to be, more women are going into work, more women are earning more money and don't have to stay in unhappy marriages because they need to to pay for the bills or for money just generally. There's also improved contraception, and this is definitely with the growth of the pill from the 1960s, and it's easier. And there's easier access to safe and legal abortion. Men may also, as a result of this, may feel less responsible to marry women who have unintentionally become pregnant, and women may feel under less pressure to marry the future father, again because there's more access to economic support or economic employment for single parents. There are fewer shotgun weddings. Shotgun weddings are perhaps an old-fashioned term where reluctant couples are forced into marriage by the father of the pregnant woman. And this kind of harks back to traditionalist views of what a marriage should look like. Also, reproductive technology is available to women, so sometimes being a lone parent, and increasingly, is a choice. Lots of women these days decide that they haven't met the right person, and decide to have a child by themselves. And there's much better technology and fertility treatment available today. And that's also the case for men as well, who decide to have children alone. That option, there's lots of surrogate mums out there, and I gave you the example of Ronaldo. So there's many different options of how to bring up a children in today's society, and there's an increasing diversification. Changing social attitudes and secularization. So when we're talking about secularization, we mean a move away from religion. So there's less social stigma or disapproval, I suppose, of lone parents. Women are therefore less afraid of the social consequences of becoming a lone parent. Whereas before it might have been, frowned upon. Would have been heavily disapproved of within the local communities and the society more broadly. However, we still see this perspective, the new right perspective, and we'll have to hark back to the information on the new right perspective. And I think you did this with Miss Gambier in the first part of your study of sociology. And the new right perspective is a very traditional conservative perspective, and arguably it's on the rise. And one of the leading proponents of the new right perspective is probably Rees-Mogg here. And the new right sees the growth in lone parenthood as one of the major signs of the decline of conventional family life and marriage, and more broadly, the decline in society. Lone parent families, and particularly lone, never married mothers, have been portrayed by the media, and I put some examples up here, and conservative politicians as promiscuous parasites. These are some of the terms that I found, blamed for everything from rising crime rates amongst children through to housing shortages, increasing drug abuse, educational failure of children, and the general breakdown of society. The problems created by lone parents, particularly for boys, are usually explained by the lack of a male role model in the home, and therefore boys don't get proper socialization into how to act within society. Lone parenthood has often been presented as a major social problem, and the media have often exaggerated and sensationalised reporting, stirring up waves of public concern about lone parents and presented them as a threat to society and the stability of family life. Such a wave of public concern, caused by exaggerated paper headlines and politician sound bites, is often what is called a moral panic. And this isn't something, so moral panic is a term often linked with the media unit, which you won't study, or the upcoming year nines will be studying it. Moral panic is a concept which means a wave of public concern about some exaggerated or imaginary threat to society stirred up by overblown and sensationalised reporting in the media. And I suppose the most recent one that we probably had is about immigration. And there was a lot of newspaper headlines and politician rhetoric about immigrants coming over, coming to England, and the impact that was going to have on society, and the rise in terrorism, for example. Okay, when in actual fact the numbers were quite small. And we'll see the same kind of thing with the new right. So the new right, and we can dispel some of the myths of the new right. So single, never married lone mothers only account for 50% of all lone parents. So that's women that have children and decide to stay single, from the birth of the child. That's 57%. So that's a large proportion of other parents who were together when they had the child for some time and then divorced at a later point when they decided that the relationship wasn't working. Okay, so actually, single, never married, lone mothers isn't and doesn't account for a huge amount. The problems allegedly created by absent fathers has also, I think, been questioned on the grounds that it's not always the present or absence of a father that is important, but it's whether the father is actively involved in the children's upbringing. I'm sure there are probably many fathers in two-parent families as well who fail to involve themselves in the care or discipline of their children. And these problems are likely, just as much to, might lead to crime rates among children, in any household where a child isn't adequately supervised or disciplined. Okay, so it's about having parents who are actively involved in a child's life that is important, rather than that's let's see, what's the next one? Myth that lone teenagers, so myth that lone teenage mums get pregnant so that they can jump the queue for council housing. And this is a misleading myth, that lone teenage mothers getting pregnant to jump the queue for council housing. And this was research by Gingerbread, which is this wonderful organisation which I put down here, which fights on behalf of single parents, and provides legal advice, and tries to change the law to make sure that there's more equality for single parent families. Gingerbread also pointed out in 2017 that less than 2% of lone parents are actually teenagers in this country. So teenagers, according to the Gingerbread study, is 16 to 19. And actually the average age of a lone parent is around 38. Okay, so that's everything that you really need to know about about lone parents. It's an important topic because it is one of the, we're talking about changes within families, within British society, there's one of the major changes that you could point to is the rise in lone parent families. And this is quite often can be linked to, if you were to have an essay question on explain why sociologists agree that the rise of the lone parent family is bad for society. I suppose the perspectives that you'd want to bring in for this would be the new right, who would talk about juvenile delinquency, i.e. increasing crime rates, that talk about absent fathers, but you would juxtapose this probably with a feminist perspective as well. But so this is quite an interesting topic, an interesting study for as part of our families unit.